What is going on, guys? This is All Gaming with my review of七つの大罪, or 7 Deadly Sins episode 9. And this episode, it was actually pretty good. We got the awesome fight between King and Guila. And not only that, we also made some pretty good story progression as we now are finding Diane's sacred treasure, and we see that, you know, our 7 deadly sins, or at least 3 of them, they will have to compete in this tournament, because that right there is the only way that they can get the weapon, you know, without stealing it. And so now we see the episode itself. It picks off from last week where we have King now arriving, and we see him now, you know, coming in there, you know, to attack Guila. And so when they start fighting, you know, King is already, you know, doing a lot better than the other sins were. And not only that, he actually wants to fight her one-on-one. And at first, Guila thought that, you know, he was like crazy for wanting this. But we see now that all the other sins, they were like fine with it. But once again, we have Diane here. She was acting like she was so hurt, like she was dying, just so that Milados could give her some attention. But it wasn't working, because Milados, I'm guessing he was like used to that, you know, for all the time they've been together. So obviously it would not work on him. But when we have King versus Guila going on, we also have Elaine. She was like watching the fight, and we see now that King, not only was he, you know, the king of the fairy forest and the people, but his real name is actually, you know, like Harley Quinn. And we see now that when King was like fighting Guila, this guy was like on a whole nother level. Like at first, you know, Guila seemed almost impossible to beat, but King here was definitely making her eat her words, because, you know, she thought that he was crazy for one 1v1, but we see King was like definitely more than enough. But I like the part, like the animation for the fight scene. To me, it was definitely good. I loved it. Like the way Guila was moving and the way she was like countering, you know, King's weapon. That right there, I was digging a lot. And not only that, when we see another one of King's weapon forms, where it could like multiply to like all these like mini daggers, that right there was cool. And not only that, we see now that like Gulila's power, you know, of explosion, that right there is no joke, and it definitely should not be, you know, like very you know, underrated or underestimated, because we see now she had power, but King here was like able to counter them. And so we see at one point when he got all those like daggers behind her, and he made them, you know, rain down on her. I thought that right there might have been it, but no, Guila is actually a lot tougher than you think, and she easily, you know, got back up. But luckily, you know, like this time, she had made just like one mistake and was going to attack with like full power, you know, when it came to her explosion. And that right there allowed Milados to come in there and use full counter. And that right there, you know, like did kind of defeat her, but at the same time, like I would imagine if this right here was her real body, I would have said that she might be able to fight for a bit longer. But because this right here was her spirit, you know, that full counter right there, it actually, you know, sent her back, you know, to her real body. And so now we see that the capital of the dead, it was now rejecting them. And this right here is where we get some fifth come into play, because we have Ban here saying goodbye to Elaine once more, and then we also have those kids there as well. So those kids were like actually dead, but I'm guessing, you know, they appear, or they can appear whenever someone, you know, comes to that village if they choose to. So seeing those two, it was definitely upsetting, because it definitely would have been, you know, a lot nicer if they were alive. But obviously that right there wasn't the case. And we see now that when Elaine was like thanking King for protecting Ben, and when he called out her name, that right there is where they, you know, like were kicked out for good. I do wish though that King and Elaine could have got some closure, because even though Elaine has like every right to be upset with King, it definitely would have been nice if they could have said farewell, you know, on a better note, because King never got to say goodbye to her, because when he finally returned, you know, in the flashback, that forest was like already destroyed, and of course Elaine was like already dead. So that right there was kind of messed up though. But now we see now that, you know, King is now sticking with them, which is nice. And we see now that he was like wondering who this girl was, and what was her, you know, relation with Milados. And we see, you know, like always, Milados, he's like joking around, and we see that right now, he had told King they were lovers, and of course, Elizabeth, was denying it, and then we see, and then like settle for touching partners, and he did, have her touching his chest, and that right there was like funny as well. But once he learns that like she's the princess, we see once again King goes into the form that he was like actually known for in the past, and this time he was like wearing some very very old fashioned attire. But we see now that like even though he like looking like this, we have Elizabeth pretty much telling him to relax, and so we see now that when he does turn back, we learn now that this kid form is actually his true appearance, because obviously he did not have the country at all to be in this state, and I'm guessing like he only had that other form to look more like an adult and be with the other sins back in the day. So that right there, it kind of makes sense, but I do wonder why they can't pick that kind of form. That right there, I do wonder even now. And so now afterwards, I almost forgot that when they first went back, they saw Guila. And so of course, like she was still kind of asleep, but her body was like standing, and she was like still in the same position as when she had attacked herself. And so when her leader, I believe his name was Hilbium, whatever his name was, when he came there, we see now that like somebody had marked up her face, and that right there was hilarious. And what even made it more funny, it was that her leader, I guess, he also thought she looked better with it, and that right there, it was definitely funny. And so now we see that now we see that when Elizabeth called King strong, like he got a major power boost from his sacred treasure, and apparently the other sins, they don't have theirs. And so we see that Meliodas, he has sold his band, his was stolen, and Diana lost hers, because with like even though Solo they are of course pretty powerful with their sacred treasures, their power are like multiplied. So that right there goes to show how important it is, and the fact that like none of them have it except for King. That right there is like horrible news. But there was like one part in the episode where we have like this random army, and we see this like gigantic guy, like leading them, and we see out of nowhere Gil Thunder and this other guy, I believe his name is pronounced Hasur. They like came down from the sky, obviously because Gil Thunder power, they were able to cultivate. But we see that these two, I'm guessing that they were easily able to to wipe out these men. And because when we go back to the capital, we see now that there were like these two knights. One was like Dreyfus, I believe. Yeah, one was like Dreyfus, and the other one I believe is called Henriksen. Hopefully I'm saying their names right. But we have Dreyfus here. He was like talking to all the other knights, and of course like most of them we not seen before. But of course anyone can like recognize Guila, because she's the one that we see recently. But after this guy was like done giving his speech, we have Gil Thunder and Hasser. They went to talk to Dreyfus, and we see now that like Hasser here, he had no idea that the sins would be their opponents in this holy war. But we have Dreyfus here bringing up Meliodas' sin, about where he actually took out this kingdom, in his wrath. And we see, like a quick glimpse of a little flashback where we have Meliodas standing in front of like this giant black crater. So that right there will play a major role, because if that right there was like hinted right now, can you imagine, like when it's shown and we'll learn about it, how angry he had to really be to actually destroy a place like that, because that right there was like crazy. But now we see that when Hasser left, we have Gil Thunder telling Dreyfus something privately about how Henriksen, like apparently he's actually meeting up with like all of these, like Holy Knight princesses, he's calling for something, and we see what that is because King had mentioned that like Guila, she was actually an apprentice for Holy Knight the other day, and now she's actually one. So that right there is a bit crazy to believe, but we do see how that's possible because we see now that like Jericho and I believe her name was like Twigo, pretty much characters that we saw in past episodes. These two now were actually summoned by Henriksen, and we see Guila and her boss is there as well. And so we see now that Henriksen, he actually has the demon that Ban killed in the fairy forest, there. And this demon, even though it should be dead, it still has blood, like going through its body. So that right there, was a bit surprising. But now we see that like the Sins, their next move now is to find everybody's sacred treasure, because obviously they are definitely going to need it, especially with how powered up these knights are now. But it was funny though how we had Ban and King now sharing a room because pretty much Hawk had tricked them, and so even though that day was messed up, it was definitely funny. And so now we have Elizabeth. She was now worried about her family because she did ask King if he heard anything about her father and her sisters, but sadly he didn't. And so now she's like worried about that. But we have Milodas. He was like in a room trying to calm her down. And we see that when he had suggested that they call it a day, we have Hawk moving quick as lightning right there, as he easily wrapped him up with ropes like he always does. So that right there was funny. But now we see that the Sins, they have found this village now, and they have this hammer that like nobody can use. And we see now that when we go to investigate, Diane, she cannot go there for some reason because apparently like giants came there a few years ago and they just messed the place up. And so now all giants were banned. So if she went there or tried to, that right there would just cause problems for them, and they can investigate like how they would want to. So she has to stay behind, even though she didn't really want to. But luckily, we have Elizabeth, and because these two are a lot closer now, they're gonna stay there and and talk with each other, because Elizabeth actually treats Diane like a regular girl, unlike a giant girl. So that right there is like definitely good. But now we see that when they were walking through the village, there's like the festival going on, but then there's also this like tournament as well, a fighting tournament. And so we see that like Ban and Milodas, they were definitely hyped up, to join this, but King here did not want to. And so Milodas, he had no choice but to actually, drag King along, and pretty much force him, to like join up. But not only that, we also have like this big guy. He picked up Milodas, trying to be so threatening, but obviously, like we all know, there is no way this guy could even like touch Milodas in a fight, even though he was a 3-time winner. And so now we see a Hazard, who's a holy knight. He actually walked by and stopped this guy. And so now we see that this former champion now had a grudge between our characters here. But obviously, we have our 3 members of the Sins. They're gonna join this. We have the former champion, and we have a Harser as well. But not only that, it's like some female with like purple hair, and she had like this big guy beside her. She recognized the Sins, because so right now they're like already exposed, but I'm pretty sure she won't sell them out, or at least I hope that she won't. But now we see, pretty much that right there is where the episode ends. But then, after the credits, we get a lot more. And so now we see, Henriksen, he actually got some blood from the demon, and he now wants Jericho and Twigo, to drink the blood, so that they could get more power. And so we see now both of them were like thinking about their past and their horrible defeats. And so we see that when they, drink the blood, Jericho immediately, she like splits her blood and she collapses. So I'm pretty sure that right there, was the fool, most people that she had died and wasn't compatible, because we had a Twiggo. He was like still standing, and we even have a sorry about that. Now where was I was saying that, you know, Jericho, she had coughed up blood and collapsed on the floor. So I'm pretty sure that right there was to like fool most people that it was Twiggo was the one who actually was compatible, when it was actually the opposite, because even though he was like feeling, you know, all this power, it was actually, you know, destroying him, as we see his body grow to like this disgusting blob form till eventually, you know, he explodes. And so now we see Jericho was the one, and we see her now getting up, but her eyes look a lot different. But now we have Guila. She was helping her, or she pretty much, you know, made her look up, and she had like welcomed her to her side. And so now we see they were all, you know, looking at her. But I feel like because of the way, you know, Gil Thunder, you know, told Dreyfus about, you know, like Henderson doing this, I feel that maybe Dreyfus has no idea what's going on, and Henderson is doing this behind everybody's back. But he's keeping Dreyfus out of it for some reason. I have no idea. But the episode, like I said, the episode was definitely good. I loved it. You know, King versus Goliath, but it was a good fight. We did get some pretty good story progression, and we now see what the Capitol is like really up to, especially with like with how all these knights are getting their power. And so for that, I'm going to give episode probably a 9 out of 10, because to me it was definitely that good. But as always, don't forget to like the video and subscribe, because it really helps me out. And you gotta take it easy. And I will see you all next time.